I've been expanding my spinning library recently, so it seemed like a good time to talk about some of the books that I go back to time and time again. I'm Bex, and this is a channel all about knitting and spinning and occasionally some other crafty stuff. I think spinning books, like most other craft books, can be sorted into two categories. Those which are there to mainly help you get the basics of a hobby, and those which are useful far beyond the beginner stages for reference. The books I'm going to talk about today all fall into the latter category. We're going to start with the one that you've probably heard me recommend before in any of my 51 Yarn series, and that is the Fleece and Fibre Sourcebook. This represents an absolutely mammoth amount of research by the authors Deborah Robson and Carol Acarius, and includes over 200 fibre-bearing animals. And although it's not a completely exhaustive list, it does cover the vast majority of fibres that a hand spinner might come into contact with. This book is all about recognising that different breeds have different properties, and all of them have their uses for specific projects. As spinners, we're incredibly lucky that we've got the opportunity to work with a wide range of fleece, not just the limited set of fibres that yarn manufacturers decide are commercial enough to bother with. There's a brief introduction to the properties of natural fibres and the history of spinning, along with a glossary of fleece-related terms and a really handy list of wools broken down by their general characteristics, whether they're soft, sturdy, or reliably versatile. It also talks about the commercial processing of fleece into yarn, but this isn't really the book for you if you want to learn how to prepare a fleece yourself. The main draw of this book is the in-depth study of hundreds of fleeces from well-known breeds like Merino and BFL to Coalbred and Whiteface Woodland. For each breed, there's information on their history, along with the general characteristics of the fleece, like the rough weight, staple length, fibre diameter, lock characteristics and colour. There's also a panel about the use of that fibre, things like how it takes dye, how to prepare it best, and the kinds of projects it's best suited to. There are also photographs of raw and clean staples, yarns spun in various different ways, plus, in many cases, knitted and woven samples. Obviously, because fleece is a natural product, there will be variations within the breed, so the fleece that you're working with might not exactly match the characteristics that you see in the book, but it does give you a really good rough guide. Unless I'm working with a fibre that I've used so many times before that I'm 100% confident in its processing and use, I refer to this book for every single project, whether I'm working from raw fleece or not. If you're looking for something that will talk you step by step through how to prepare a fleece, this is not going to be the book for you, but it's a really important reference, and I think whether you're working from fleece or not, it is definitely something that I would recommend for every spinner's library. I think it's a bit of a must-have. The only exception would be people who just never work with animal fibres. Obviously, it's not going to be particularly useful for you if that's the case. There's also a smaller book called The Field Guide to Fleece by the same authors. It covers 100 sheep breeds, so quite a wide variety, but not any of the camelids or other critters that are listed in the Fleece and Fibre Sourcebook. It gives you a brief overview of each breed, along with the information that you might need if you're eyeing up a fleece at a fibre festival and want to know what you might do with it. The characteristics included for each breed are the origin of the breed, typical fleece weight, staple length, fibre diameter and natural colours, along with how it takes dyes where applicable, and the best uses for the fleece, including things like whether it felts well and what the expected stitch definition might be like. Obviously, all of that is also dependent on how you actually process and spin that fleece, and there might be variations within the breed, but again, it's a starting point, and this is designed as a quick reference guide for those situations where maybe you don't have the ability to drag the entire Fleece and Fibre Sourcebook around with you. There are also two photos for each breed, one of the sheep itself and one of a typical staple of fleece. This book is perfect as a portable reference when you go to a fibre festival or a guild sale. It's also about half the price of the source book, so if you're on a very tight budget, this might be all you need. Hey folks, Editing Bex here, just dropping by to mention that a lot of these books are also available as digital versions via the Apple Bookstore, Kindle Store and so on. Now I know that not everybody's a fan of digital books, but if it means that you can have the entire Fleece and Fibre Sourcebook on your phone, It's got to be worth considering. There are a couple of books on this list which I have as both physical and digital versions, just so that they're really easy for me to reference wherever I am. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. Let's get back to the books. The next one is The Spinner's Book of Fleece by Beth Smith, subtitled A Breed by Breed Guide to Choosing and Spinning the Perfect Fibre for Every Purpose. Although it covers just a fraction of the breeds that the Sourcebook does, this is a much more accessible option if you're new to working with raw fibre. For example, the Sourcebook doesn't really tell you what a raw fleece would look like when you unroll it, which bits are which, or how to skirt it, scour it, store it, prepare it, etc. in any great detail, while the Book of Fleece does. It talks about the different tools in a way that are realistic for people who are new to fibre prep. So for example, it doesn't automatically assume that you have a drum carder, and it's quite candid about what can and can't be done with less expensive tools. There's information at the beginning about the different fibre prep tools available and how to choose what's right for you. Instructions on how to use the tools are included with the appropriate breed group. There's an introduction to buying fleece, so how much to buy, what flaws to look out for, and so on. And then it goes into how to get from that fleece to yarn. Then we get into the breed-specific information. This is divided into 5 sections: fine wools, long wools, downs and down type, multi-coated and other. It goes in depth with notes and samples on 19 different breeds, and a few of those might not be accessible to you depending on where you live. Although at the beginning of each breed chapter, there is a list of other breeds in that group with a brief roundup of their characteristics, and you're encouraged to look at the fleece that's in front of you and prepare and spin it according to its characteristics. So while it doesn't cover as many of the breeds as the Sourcebook does, the benefit is that each section of the Spinner's Book of Fleece contains detailed information about how to scour and prepare that type of fibre, whether that's by flicking, combing, carding, or just using your hands. The breed studies each include multiple samples of different yarns using varied techniques and different numbers of plies, accompanied by knitted and woven samples. Beth also references a lot of other spinning gurus' work, like Margaret Stove's merino scouring methods or Anne Field's ideas on spinning to the crimp. So it can be an introduction to a lot of further research if you want to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I definitely recommend this if you have limited experience of working with raw fibre and you want to get the best out of the fleeces that you work with. It's still a book that I go back to when I want to remind myself of what to expect from processing a specific breed. Next up is The Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs by Sarah Anderson. One reviewer described this as a recipe book for spinners, and I think that's a great description. It details the techniques for creating 80 different types of yarn. The main attraction of this book are those recipes, with chapters for singles for plying, standalone singles, spiral plies, opposing plies, bouclés, cable yarn, crepes, core yarns and novelty yarns. In each category, there's a guide to the basic techniques that are used in creating that type of yarn, followed by a series of examples of its variants. For example, in cable yarns, we start with a basic 4-ply cable, then explore 8-ply, texture cables, cables with different types of yarn, beaded cables, and there's also a lot of information on troubleshooting and really looking at the details, like the tension on each strand of yarn when you're plying, which can make a massive difference to the final result. There are photos of knitting and weaving samples, although not every yarn gets the same treatment. So for some it's just a photo of the yarn itself, for others it's a plain swatch, and then sometimes it's an example of how it could be used in a project. Along the way there are also interesting little diversions, like multiple experiments on what kind of yarn is most durable for socks. There is a section of basic spinning information at the beginning, detailing how to purchase, scour and prepare fleece with hand cards, flick carders, hand combs and drum carders. It doesn't discuss blending boards because they were nowhere near as popular in 2012 when it was published as they are now, but it does mention using hand cards to blend coloured wools. Spinning Basics also covers drafting in woolen, worsted and from the fold variations. While none of that chapter is super in-depth, it would be enough to get you started. It's also all in one place at the beginning of the book, rather than scattered across multiple chapters like the Spinner's Guide to Fleece, but ultimately that's not the reason why you'd buy the book. This is the ultimate reference if you want to explore yarn structures beyond standard 2 and 3 plies. There are even 64 cards in the back pocket which you can take out if you want a quick reminder. I refer to the Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs pretty much whenever I want to explore a yarn structure that's outside of my normal defaults. Because I don't spin them very often, I usually need a reminder of the basics before I start. If you're intrigued by textured yarns or you just want to experiment with different structures for durability, then this book should absolutely have a place on your shelf. Our next book is Yarnitecture by Gillian Marino. Yarnitecture really filled an interesting gap in spinning literature. So many books assume that you have the time, space and the inclination to work from fleece, and that's just not the case for every spinner. Yarnitecture is a bit different. It's a book for spinning knitters who enjoy using commercially prepared fibre and want to spin more intentionally to get yarn that they can use in their projects. It has a particular focus on hand-dyed tops, but there's also information on other forms of fibre prep like bats, and of course you can apply the same principles whatever raw materials you're working with. The structure of this book is Gillian's idea that if you want to be more intentional in your spinning, you can think about spinning a yarn like you would think about building a house. Starting with the blueprint, why you're spinning it, what your aims are, moving on to the foundations, which fibre you're using, the frame, how you would prepare the fibre, the walls, how you draft, the roof, how you ply, the paint equaling the colours you're using and how you manipulate them, along with chapters on finishing and knitting with your handspun. The book also includes 12 patterns, which take up almost a third of the book. I'm personally not a fan of patterns in spinning books, although I think in this case they're good examples of spinning a yarn specifically for the qualities that you want in the finished object. I just feel like that's the section that's most likely to make it feel a bit dated in a few years, but that's just me maybe. This is not designed to be a learn to spin book. It's also probably not for you if you just want to sit and spin for the sake of spinning. If you get this book, I would really encourage you to read it cover to cover and then refer back to it whenever you plan a new project. There are just so many useful tips and lots of little details that you might not have noticed otherwise, but which can make a big difference in your projects. I find myself dipping into it pretty much every project at some point. And finally, 51 yarns to spin before you cast off. This is what my 51 yarn series is based on, and I wanted to include it here just to clear up a few things about what you should expect from it. This is not a book aimed at beginners. It's designed to inspire you to move outside of your comfort zone. It doesn't give you all the information. Instead, I've always seen it as a prompt to research a subject that might be outside of your usual realm of experience. And in doing so, you'll probably learn things which are useful to you, even if that technique is not one that you're going to revisit frequently. For each of the topics, it presents an illustrated page of tips and definitions, and it's often accompanied by a bit of information about the origin of the technique. It's not a standalone reference, and for most people, I would recommend getting all of the other books on this list first. But if you're someone who tends to have quite an experimental learning style, then you might find that this provides you with a little bit of a fun curriculum to explore. So I hope you found this video useful. Check out this one next, and I'll see you again soon.